Welcome back to Patriot Power Products Trusted Guides and Reviews, where everyone's favorite hosts, Jim and Ann, talk about essential information you can use right now, and the best products and the best discounts available online and elsewhere for patriots following the American way.
All right, everyone, welcome back. Today, we are going to be doing a deep dive into something super important. We're talking emergency preparedness. Specifically, we're going to break down how to build a 3-month emergency water supply.
3 months, that's a pretty good amount of time to plan for.
Yeah, we want to make sure we're really prepared, just in case things hit the fan. And, when it comes to the essentials, water is at the top of that list.
Right. Absolutely. You can only survive, like 3 days without water? Something like that?
Yeah, pretty much. So we better make sure we have enough of it.
For sure. And emergencies, they can disrupt our water supply in so many ways. Think about natural disasters, infrastructure failures, you name it.
Right. That makes total sense. So we need to be prepared, basically become our own water suppliers for a while.
Exactly. That's the idea.
Okay, so how much water are we talking about here for a 3-month supply? Like, how do we even begin to figure that out?
Well, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, they recommend having at least 1 gallon of water per person per day.
1 gallon per person per day. Okay.
Yep. And keep in mind, that gallon isn't just for drinking. It's got to cover everything. Cooking, basic hygiene, the whole 9 yards.
Oh, wow. So I can't even imagine, trying to wash my hands or cook a meal without water.
Nope, not going to happen.
All right, so 1 gallon per person per day for 90 days. That's starting to add up.
It does, yeah.
Wow.
But 1 gallon really is just the bare minimum. We need to factor in some other things, too.
Okay, like what?
Well, think about individual needs, climate, activity level, even pets. All that plays a role.
Okay, so if I live in, let's say, Arizona, where it's super hot, I'm going to need more than 1 gallon a day.
Most likely, yeah. And if you have a physically demanding job, same thing. You'll need more water.
Got it. That makes sense. And pets, what about them?
Pets need water, too. A good rule of thumb is about 1 quart of water per day for your furry friends.
Okay, so how do we actually calculate all of this? Is there a magic formula?
There is. It's pretty straightforward. To get your total water storage needs, you take the number of people in your household and multiply that by 1 gallon. Then you multiply that number by 90 for the 90 days.
Okay, so far so good.
Then to account for your pets, you're going to multiply the number of pets you have by 0.25 gallons per day and multiply that by 90 days.
Okay, so let's say we've got a family of 4 with a dog and a cat. Walk me through that math real quick.
Sure. So for the humans, it'd be 4 people times 1 gallon per day times 90 days, which gives us 360 gallons.
360 gallons.
Then for the pets, it's 2 pets times 0.25 gallons per day times 90 days. That's a total of 45 gallons.
So 360 for the humans plus 45 for the pets. That's 405 gallons total.
Exactly.
Wow, that's a lot of water.
Yeah, it adds up quickly.
So now the big question is, where on earth do we store all this water? We're going to need some serious containers.
You got that right. Choosing the right containers is key, not only for practicality, but for safety too. And there are a lot of options out there.
Okay, so break it down for me. What kind of containers are we talking about?
Well, first, we've got those purpose-built water storage containers. The ones designed specifically for long-term water storage.
Oh, yeah, like those big blue barrels you see in survival movies.
Exactly. Those are usually 55-gallon water barrels. They're a pretty good deal per gallon, they're super durable, and they don't take up too much space, relatively speaking.
That sounds good. But those things must be insanely heavy once they're full.
Yeah, they're definitely not easy to move once they're filled. You'll probably need a pump or siphon to get the water out.
Right, okay. So maybe not the best option if you need to be mobile.
Right. So if you need something more portable, water bricks are a good option. They usually hold 3.5 or 5 gallons, and they're stackable, so they're pretty easy to store.
Like building a little water brick wall. That's kind of cool.
It is. They are a bit more expensive per gallon, though, and they might take up a bit more floor space just because of their shape.
Got it. So we've got the purpose-built options, but what about using stuff we might already have around the house, like those big water jugs or even empty soda bottles?
Yeah, you can definitely repurpose commercial water containers like those. It's convenient, and we all have a few lying around. But keep in mind, bottled water usually lasts about 1 to 2 years. And those big 5-gallon jugs, they have a shelf life of around 2 to 3 years.
Okay, so not ideal for super long-term storage.
Right. Now, those DIY solutions like soda bottles, you got to be careful with those. You need to make sure they're really clean and only use them for short-term storage, maybe 6 months to a year max.
Okay, so for the long haul, we're sticking with those purpose-built containers or the commercial jugs. But now we've got another problem. Where do we put all this water? We're talking about hundreds of gallons.
Yep, that's another big one. Figuring out the right storage location is just as important as choosing the right containers.
So what are we looking for in a water storage haven?
Ideally, you want a spot that's cool, dark, and away from any chemicals.
Right.
Aim for a temperature between 50 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit.
It's basically like a basement.
Exactly. Basements are usually ideal. They're naturally cool, they're protected from the elements, and they usually have the support to handle all that water weight.
Makes sense. What if you don't have a basement, though?
There are still some other good options. A garage can work, especially if it's insulated and temperature controlled. The concrete floor is good for supporting the weight too. Or a utility room could work as long as it's climate controlled.
Okay, so there are some options even if you don't have that perfect basement setup. Is there anything else we need to be careful about when choosing a location? Besides, not tripping over giant water barrels in the middle of the night.
Yeah, definitely. Think about safety. Water is heavy. Like really heavy.
Imagine.
Each gallon weighs about 8.34 pounds, so you got to make sure your floor can handle all that weight.
And don't stack containers too high. You don't want them to topple over.
Good point. Safety first. Okay, so we choose a spot that's practical, accessible, and structurally sound. Got it. Now, once we have all our water stored away, is there anything else we need to do? Do we just kind of wait for an emergency? Not quite. Even if you store your water perfectly, you still need to think about treating it. Kind of like having a purification playbook, just in case.
Oh, a purification playbook. I like that. What exactly is in this playbook?
Well, there are two main categories of water treatment, chemical and physical. Let's start with chemical.
Okay, chemical treatment. When you say that, I kind of think of, complicated stuff, potentially dangerous stuff. Is it really safe?
It is, as long as it's done right. The most common methods use either regular unscented household bleach or water treatment tablets.
Wait, bleach? Like the stuff we use to clean the bathroom?
Yep, that's the one. It's actually really effective, but the key is using the right amount. You want to use 2 drops of bleach per quart of clear water, or 4 drops if the water's cloudy. And then you have to let it sit for 30 minutes before you can drink it.
So it's pretty straightforward, but you got to be precise with the measurements and the wait time? What about those water treatment tablets? What are those like?
Those are super convenient, especially if you need something portable. They come in iodine and chlorine dioxide varieties. Just make sure to follow the instructions on the package and keep an eye on the expiration dates.
Got it. So chemical treatment can be a good option. What about physical treatment methods?
The most basic and reliable method is boiling. You just bring the water to a rolling boil for 1 minute, or 3 minutes if you're at an altitude above 5,000 feet.
That does sound pretty simple.
It is. And there's also filtration. You can use different kinds of filters, like ceramic filters, activated carbon filters, even reverse osmosis systems.
Okay, so lots of options there.
Yep. But those can be more complicated to set up and maintain.
Right. So it's good to have a few different methods in your toolkit, just in case.
Exactly. It's all about having options.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot here. We talked about calculating our water needs, choosing containers, finding a storage location, and even figuring out how to treat the water. Is there anything else we need to know?
We've covered a lot, that's true. But there's one more thing. Maintaining our water supply to make sure it's safe and ready to use when we need it. That's just as important as the initial setup.
Okay, I have a feeling this is where things get less exciting, but equally important.
You got it. So we're talking water maintenance. It's kind of like, having a car. You don't just buy it and then never change the oil.
Right, you got to keep up with it, make sure it's running smoothly, especially if you need it in a pinch.
Exactly. So think of it like having a regular checkup schedule for your water.
Okay, a water checkup. I'm intrigued. What does that involve?
Well, first you've got your monthly tasks. Simple stuff, really. Checking for leaks in the containers, making sure there's no damage, and just generally making sure the storage area is still in good shape.
So just a quick visual inspection every month. Sounds easy enough?
Yep, exactly. Then every 3 months, you'll want to do a bit more.
Like what?
Well, you should test your water quality, clean the storage area, and update your inventory records.
Inventory records? Wait, you mean like keeping a spreadsheet of all my water containers?
Yep, that's the idea. It might seem a little, over the top.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's actually really helpful to keep track of what you have, when you filled it, all that good stuff, especially if you're building up your supply gradually over time.
Right. It's easy to lose track if you're not careful.
For sure. So we've got monthly and quarterly checkups. Then annually, you'll want to do a full refresh.
A full refresh. What does that mean?
Basically, you replace all your stored water, give all your containers a thorough cleaning, and just review your whole system.
Wow, a full water replacement every year. That sounds like a lot of work.
It does take some effort, yeah. But it's worth it for the peace of mind, knowing that your water is fresh and ready to go if you need it.
I guess so. Okay, so that's the maintenance schedule. Is there anything else?
One more crucial thing, rotation.
Rotation? Wait, like rotating the tires on a car?
Kinda, yeah. The idea is to make sure your water supply is always being refreshed, so you don't end up with, stale water in an emergency.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do you actually rotate a water supply? What does that look like?
So for commercially bottled water, it's pretty easy. Just follow the expiration dates on the bottles. They're usually good for 1 to 2 years.
Right.
For water that you've stored yourself, you'll want to rotate it every 6 to 12 months.
Okay, so basically just emptying the containers, cleaning them, and refilling them with fresh water.
Exactly. Now, for those big storage tanks, it's a bit different.
Yeah, how do you rotate those?
Typically, you do a full rotation annually for those. And here's the thing. Using proper treatment methods can actually extend that storage time.
Oh, really?
Yep. But you got to monitor the water quality regularly just to be safe.
Okay, so there's definitely more to water maintenance than I realized. It's an ongoing process for sure.
It is, but it's crucial if you want to have safe, drinkable water when you really need it.
Absolutely. So we've talked a lot about storing water in containers. But are there any other sources of water that we might not be thinking of?
There are actually a few. You might be surprised by what you can find, even right inside your own home.
Really? Like, what? Are we talking secret underground springs or something?
Not quite. But think about your hot water heater. It's basically a giant water reservoir.
Oh, yeah, I guess it is.
Depending on the size, it can hold anywhere from 30 to 80 gallons of water.
Wow. I never thought about my hot water heater like that.
It's a hidden gem. Just make sure to turn off the power to the heater first and let the water cool down before you use it.
Good point.
And, before winter hits, make sure to drain the pipes to prevent them from freezing and bursting.
Right, okay. So my hot water heater is a potential water source. What else?
Believe it or not, your pipes themselves hold a decent amount of water. You can drain them to get to it.
Interesting. So it's like my house is hiding a secret network of water sources.
It kind of is. And what about the toilet? People always say you can use the water from the tank in an emergency. Is that true?
Yeah, I've always wondered about that.
It's true, but only the tank, not the bowl. The water in the tank is usually clean and usable, but I'd still recommend treating it before you drink it.
Good to know. Anything else inside the house?
Don't forget about ice cubes. You can melt those down for drinking water. And in a real pinch, you can even use the liquid from canned fruits and vegetables.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered the inside of the house. What about outside? What about natural water sources?
Nature is full of water if you know where to look.
Right, let's go full Bear Grylls here. What kind of natural sources are we talking about?
Streams, rivers, lakes, ponds, those are the obvious ones. But it's super important to treat any water from these sources before you drink it.
Yeah, no one wants to end up with Giardia or something.
Exactly. Always treat natural water. But even rainwater can be a good source. If you set up a rain barrel, you can collect a surprising amount of water over time.
I've actually been thinking about getting a rain barrel. Seems like a smart move, even outside of emergencies.
It is. And what about snow and ice?
Oh, yeah. Can you use those for drinking water?
Absolutely. Just melt them down. But make sure you're choosing clean sources and filter out any debris before you drink it.
Okay, so nature has our back. What about community resources? Are there any public sources we could tap into in an emergency?
It really depends on your location and the type of emergency. But there might be some options.
Like what? Public drinking fountains.
Those could work, yeah. But you gotta make sure they're still working. Swimming pools are another possibility.
Oh, wow. I never thought of a swimming pool as a giant water bottle.
Haha, right. And sometimes even water towers might be accessible. But again, it just depends on the specific situation.
Okay, so it's good to know about those potential sources.
Yeah.
But obviously safety first. And we should always follow any rules or guidelines.
For sure. And when it comes to collecting water from these sources, there are a few different methods you can use.
Like those rain barrels we were talking about.
Yep. But there are also solar stills and condensation traps. Those can be pretty handy.
Solar stills. Those sound fancy. How do those work?
They're actually pretty simple. Basically, a solar still uses the sun's energy to evaporate water, which then condenses on a cool surface, and then you collect that condensed water.
Wow, that's amazing. Like a mini water factory.
It is. And condensation traps, those work by collecting moisture from the air. You can make a really basic one with just a plastic sheet and a pit in the ground.
Okay, so there's some pretty cool ways to collect water. if you're in a pinch. But I imagine there are also some common mistakes that people make when it comes to water storage and treatment.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We could make a whole water storage mistake hall of fame based on some of the things I've seen.
Okay, I love a good cautionary tale.
Yeah.
Tell me about some of these water wisdom fails.
Well, one of the most common mistakes is using the wrong containers.
Like what? Storing water in old milk jugs.
Exactly. Milk jugs and other non-food grade containers can leach harmful chemicals into the water. And you definitely want to avoid containers that have held chemicals before because it's really hard to clean them thoroughly.
Right, that makes sense. Don't want my emergency water tasting like laundry detergent. What other container crimes are there?
Using damaged or degraded containers is a big one. Cracks, leaks, anything like that can make your water unsafe.
Okay, so choose your containers wisely. What about storage locations? What are some common mistakes there?
Storing water in direct sunlight is a huge no-no. Sunlight can damage the container, and it can also make algae or bacteria grow in the water.
Ew, that's not a flavor I want to experience. What else?
Storing water near chemicals is another one. The fumes from chemicals can actually get into the containers and contaminate the water.
Okay, so no storing my water next to the weed killer.
Nope. And high temperature areas are also a bad idea. Heat can make the water go bad faster.
Got it. So cool, dark, and chemical-free is the way to go.
Exactly. Now, when it comes to planning your water supply, there are a couple of big mistakes people make.
Like what?
Not having enough water is the most obvious one. Remember, FEMA recommends at least a gallon per person per day, plus extra for your individual needs, climate, pets, all that stuff.
Right. And we need to have a good rotation schedule in place, too.
Yep. Neglecting rotation is a recipe for stale, potentially unsafe water.
Got it. What else?
Not having a backup plan, what happens if your main water source gets contaminated or you can't access it for some reason?
Right. We need to have those alternative sources ready to go.
Exactly. Now let's talk about water treatment mistakes.
Oh, there are mistakes people make with that. I thought it was pretty straightforward.
You'd be surprised. One common one is overtreatment, like using too much bleach or combining multiple treatment methods. That can actually make the water less safe, not more safe.
Wow, I would never have thought of that. So sometimes less is more.
When it comes to water treatment, yeah, just follow the instructions and don't overdo it.
Okay, good to know. What other treatment traps should we be aware of?
The opposite. Undertreatment. Not using enough bleach, not waiting long enough, skipping steps. All of that can leave harmful stuff in the water.
So we got to be diligent and follow the instructions carefully.
Yep. No cutting corners when it comes to water safety.
I hear that. Okay, so we've covered a lot. Secret water sources, the Hall of Fame of water storage mistakes.
We have. It's been a good discussion.
I'm feeling a lot more prepared now for sure.
Yeah.
But what about the other stuff we'd need in a real emergency? Water is just one piece of the puzzle, right?
Well, exactly. It's like packing for a camping trip, but with much higher stakes. We're going to need more than just water to make it through.
Right. So what else should we be thinking about?
That's where a well-stocked emergency preparedness kit comes in.
So emergency kits,
Yeah.
like the ultimate prepper pack, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's your lifeline in an emergency. It should have everything you and your family need to survive for at least 72 hours.
72 hours. Okay, so like a long weekend's worth of supplies, just in case things go sideways.
Pretty much. Now, the exact stuff you'll need in your kit, it's going to vary depending on, your situation, where you live, all that.
Right.
But there are some core essentials that everyone should have.
Okay, let's break it down. What are the must-haves? The VIPs of the survival world.
All right, top of the list, food. And we're not talking fancy stuff here. We're talking non-perishable items that will give you energy and keep you going.
Okay, so like canned goods, dried fruits, nuts, that kind of thing. Stuff that won't go bad if the power's out.
Exactly. Things that don't need to be cooked or refrigerated. Oh, and pro tip, don't forget a manual can opener.
Oh, good point. Can't open those cans of beans without one.
Nope. Next up is a first aid kit. Super important for treating those minor injuries and stuff.
So bandages, antiseptic wipes, pain relievers, the usual suspects.
Yep. And make sure you include any personal medications that you or your family need.
Okay, so food, first aid, what else?
Shelter. You might need a tent, a tarp, even just some heavy-duty plastic sheeting. Something to create a temporary shelter if your home isn't safe.
Yeah, good point. We might not be able to stay home in an emergency.
Right, and you gotta stay warm, especially if the power is out or it's cold outside. So pack sleeping bags, blankets, warm clothing.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so food, first aid, shelter, warmth. What else?
Light. Super important if you're dealing with power outages. Flashlights, headlamps, candles, anything to help you see.
Right, those would come in handy. What about communication? How do we stay connected if our phones aren't working?
A battery-powered or hand-crank radio is a must. That way you can get emergency broadcasts and weather updates. And a whistle can be useful too, to signal for help if you need it.
So old school communication is key. No relying on the internet or our smartphones.
Exactly. You got to have backup options. Okay, so we've got food, first aid, shelter, warmth, light, communication. What else?
That seems like a pretty good list so far. What about tools? Would those be helpful?
Definitely. A multi-tool, duct tape, a wrench, a knife. Those can be super useful in a pinch.
It's like they say, if you can't fix it with duct tape, you're not using enough duct tape.
Exactly. And don't forget sanitation supplies. Toilet paper, hand sanitizer, wet wipes, garbage bags. Gotta maintain that hygiene, even in an emergency.
Yeah, good point. Hygiene is important no matter what.
Yeah.
What about cash? Do we have some on hand?
Yeah, it's a good idea to have some cash in small bills. ATMs and credit card machines might not work if the power's out.
So cash is king when the grid goes down.
Yeah.
What about, entertainment? Should we pack some books or games?
Entertainment is optional, for sure, but it can be a good way to keep spirits up, especially if you're in it for the long haul.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I think we've got a pretty comprehensive list here. Is there anything else we should keep in mind when we're building our kits?
Remember, you got to tailor your kit to your specific needs. Think about your location, your family, all of that.
Right, like if you live in an earthquake zone, you might need extra water and supplies or a wrench to shut off the gas line.
Exactly. And if you have young kids, you'll need diapers, formula, stuff like that.
So important. Emergency preparedness is not one size fits all.
Nope. Oh, and keep your kit somewhere cool, dry, and easy to get to. And check it regularly. Make sure everything's still good and hasn't expired.
Right, because an emergency kit's only helpful if it's actually ready to go.
That's the key. And one last thing. Involve your family in the planning process. Make sure everyone knows where the kit is and how to use the stuff in it.
Great point. Teamwork makes the dream work, even in emergencies.
Exactly. So we've covered a lot of ground here. Water storage, emergency kits. It can feel a bit overwhelming.
Yeah.
But remember, being prepared is all about empowering yourself and your loved ones. It's about having peace of mind, knowing that you can handle whatever comes your way.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
Don't wait to start preparing. Take it one step at a time, and you'll be surprised by how much better you feel.
Great advice. Start small, start now, and build from there. And the more you know, the more confident you'll be.
That's right. We've covered a lot, but it's just the beginning. There's always more to learn, more skills to develop. So true. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into emergency preparedness. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay prepared.